Hey, what's up guys? John here. One of the big problems, in my opinion, probably the biggest problem that Americans face today is affordability. Everything is so expensive, whether it be rent or health insurance or good food, just living a good life. It's expensive. You could make $100,000 a year, maybe $150,000 a year, and at one time that was a ton of money. But nowadays it just isn't what it used to be. People go to school for 4 years or 8 years and they spend a ton just to get through. They might spend $100,000, $200,000 a year, come out of school with massive debt and work their tail off, and then at the end, they're scraping by. Now this isn't right, and at the end of the day, people need to find a solution to this. And they point the finger at the big expenses, which are college, but not many people are really looking at college. They'll complain about it, but they're not looking at universities to greatly reduce the expense associated, although I think down the road, this definitely happens. I think that there's going to be a lot of innovation in this space. Second is health insurance. People don't talk about health insurance, but when we look at how expensive health insurance was in 2000, it was only $200 roughly per month for an individual in 2000. Then today, $467 per month for the individual is what they quote. However, I have a family of 3, soon to be a family of 4, and we're getting quotes around $2,500 per month for good health insurance. But we look at how much rents were at that same time. In 2000, $600 per month. This is in Los Angeles. And in same Huntington Beach, today, $1,550. So rents and health insurance, they've increased roughly around the same velocity, the same momentum. But here's what's happening. And it's a sad situation for landlords and for really the overall true picture of what's happening in America. So in New York, they're apparently sounding the alarm on commercial rent. They're saying that commercial rent is a big problem that they need to solve. Now let's realize, first and foremost, that a lot of these landlords are just everyday mom and pop investors. They're not the big corporations that own the small little strip center. Now what happens there is that these small mom and pop landlords that have already been beaten and battered over the last 2 years are now going to be stuck under a lot of regulation. What they want to do is they want to regulate how much office rents can be increased by, as well as commercial storefront locations. So what is rent control and how does it work? Well, rent control is a set of guidelines in which landlords have to operate inside of. It will tell you how much you can increase the rent annually, when you can and cannot evict a tenant, and for what reasons, and the set of guidelines that you'd have to move forward in on such an eviction. Now, what's fascinating to me is how this is pictured versus how it actually works. So landlords, if they want to evict a tenant for whatever reason, they will have to pay an attorney between $300 and $500 per hour in most cases. Meanwhile, the tenant will get free representation. So the incentives are lopsided. If a tenant gets sued, they don't really care because they're going to get a free legal team that's going to represent them at no cost. So what they're going to do now is this. Landlords are once again gearing up for a fight over whether the city should regulate retail and office rents. The City Council Committee on Small Business plans a hearing Friday on a bill to create rent guidelines board that would limit rent increases on small commercial spaces. The board would have jurisdiction over small retail and office spaces up to 10,000 square feet, as well as manufacturing establishments up to 25,000 square feet. As with residential rent guidelines board, the mayor would appoint the 9 members who would be a mix of landlord, tenant, and public representatives. Since introducing the bill in 2019, Councilmember Stephen Levin was secured more than 20 co-sponsors. According to an office, he said the measure is aimed at creating stability for business in rapidly gentrifying neighborhoods. It is not intervening in an existing lease, but what it is doing is taking away the incentive for landlords to rent to multinational chains that have deep pockets, Levin said. It takes away the incentive to hold a space open to wait for a chain store. Now, when you are an investor and you're buying out commercial strip centers, let's say that there's 10 opportunities to lease. Generally what the investor will want to do is they want to get one big anchor store. Could be a Publix or a Ralph's, a big anchor store. It's going to bring in foot traffic. Then what they're going to do is they're going to be able to sell the foot traffic that they're going to get from this big chain. And they're going to be able to increase rents accordingly. They might not get top dollar for that chain, but they're going to make it up on all the other rents. But what they're now going to do is regulate what they can and can't charge in these office spaces and commercial spaces. Now, what's very likely to happen is we're going to start to see a lot of these landlords that have been beaten and battered, hoping to make up the difference going forward, now stuck in a web of regulation. Now, what is then likely going to happen is we're going to see big corporations and these big private equity funds seeing this as an opportunity to run out there and buy distressed debt and buy unfortunately, the new regulation that all these former investors couldn't withstand. The real estate board argues that the opposite is true. REBNY says in order to avoid rent regulation, landlords would hold out for tenants who can lease more space all at once. The trade group also says that co-op buildings with ground floor retail would be harmed, as they would not be able to control those rents, which can help starve off increases in owners' maintenance fees. Real estate professionals say Levin's Law would hit at a most inopportune time, as the pandemic has driven down rents and devastated many property owners. Here in 2021, in the wake of the pandemic, in the wake of shutdowns, in the wake of everything expanding, reaching online retail, which is ravaging so many brick and mortar retailers, the rationale for enacting commercial rent regulation now is completely backwards. Others have said that free market commercial leasing keeps commercial strips from becoming dated by keeping aging businesses in place, denying space to new, more dynamic ones. In the office sector, competition and the prospect of higher rents inspires some landlords to modernize their spaces. The city had commercial rent control from 1945 to 1963, enacted through state laws in response to complaints about excessive rents and evictions from New York commercial tenants post-World War II, according to a 1983 article that appeared in Washington's University's Urban Annual Law. During that time, commercial rent increases were only permitted through written agreement between landlord and tenant, arbitration, or court orders. Stephen Kirkpatrick, a partner at Romer Debus, who represents property owners and commercial tenants, believes the city lacks the authority to regulate commercial rents, given that the state has previously overseen a form of commercial rent control in the city. Various forms of rent control have been proposed and debated over the past 30 years. During his State of the City address in February 2020, Mayor Bill de Blasio announced the formation of a commission to study the legality of enacting some form of commercial rent control, but the effort was halted when the pandemic hit. But some real estate interests fear that there may be enough political will this time to get commercial rent regulation over the finish line. This has been going on for literally decades. Who knows where it will go, but the timing is really unfortunate, Kirkpatrick said. Owners are hurting. But Paula Siegel, a senior staff attorney with Take Root Justice, noted that some landlords have tried to include steep rent increases 2 or 3 years into a lease in order to make up for losses during the pandemic. We have an opportunity for a reset in the pandemic, she said. It's fascinating. It is really, think about this. They go after the landlords, and I'm not complaining. All I'm saying is I think that what they should be doing is going after everyone equally. If they're going to go after landlords, they need to go after the insurance costs. They need to go after all the big corporations that are sucking out a majority of the wealth that's going into everyday Americans' pockets, rather than just pointing the finger at one group of people saying that these people are the bad guys. What's likely going to happen is if this continues and this does progress, we're going to see depreciating property values. We're going to see less money for the city. We're going to see less safety, because you have to remember, tax revenue, property tax revenue is derived by the property's value, the asset. If the values are falling, so is the tax revenue. And that means that tax revenue goes to funding police departments, school districts, street services, government jobs. It keeps the city healthy, it keeps it clean, and it keeps it attractive for tourism. What this is likely going to do is turn this into just a real big issue. So I do see this as something that could very likely pass in New York. In fact, I would probably bet on it passing. And I just hope it doesn't. What do you think? Do you think that commercial and office rents should be regulated by the city? And if you do think that, do you think that also health insurance and other expenses from these big conglomerates should also be regulated? Drop your comments below. Please smash that like button. Subscribe here. Consider subscribing on my second channel, my personal channel. I'll leave the link pinned down below in the top comment, and I'll see you guys in the next video.